This is Cast of Wonders, the fiction podcast for young adults featuring stories of the fantastic. Welcome. Episode 173 for August 9th, 2015. We return this week to the adventures of our favorite spacefarer, Cy DeGurch, with Timelines by Rick Kennett. The story originally appeared in Orb Speculative Fiction, Volume 1 in the year 2000. This story marks our 5th appearance of Cy, and we'll put a link in the show notes for you to all of her episodes. Rick Kennett lives in Melbourne, Australia, where his day job is in the transport industry. His stories have appeared in Andromeda Spaceways, Aurealis, Weird Tales, the Ghosts and Scholars Book of Shadows anthologies, and several podcasts including Pseudopod and Dunesteef. His novel, The Devil and the Deep Blue Sea, was published by Cooperative Press in 2013 and is available on Amazon. In addition to a slew of Australian publishing awards for his horror fiction, Rick has 2 Parsec Awards to his credit, including our episode Now Cydonia, which won in the short story category in 2014. And in a lovely coincidence, he's recently become the podcast correspondent for the magazine Ghosts and Scholars, which specializes in the antiquarian ghost stories of last week's author, M.R. James. And now we've a tale to tell. Timelines by Rick Kennett. The star, Dolores B, was shriveling, collapsing in upon itself and growing hotter. As Utopia plane accelerated away, Captain Brown switched from an aft view to forward, where the star field was beginning to blue shift. On the weapons repeater beside him, the Terran ship was sliding into the sights. The repeater's identification lights were on, blinking insistently. At fire control, Lieutenant Cy DeGurch stared at her weapons screen and said, "Range to targets now 4.5 million and closing." Across from her, Lieutenant Peters flipped back the plastic cover on the IFF override and jabbed his finger down on the sensor panel. It lit with the words "Genetic Code Confirmed." "Identification friend or foe override operating, sir," he said. "Range 4 million and closing," said Cy. A message from communications flashed up on Captain Brown's console, a signal from some Earth admiral he'd never heard of addressed to most immediate Martian vessel, with orders to decelerate and take position astern his ship. He decided to give the idiot Earther one last chance. For the second time in 2 minutes, he opened a line to communications. "Repeat the danger warning. Add star about to Nova." He thought of also adding that he was prepared to fire on them. Then, allowing himself a smile, he closed the line. The identification lights were dark. On the aft screens, the racing silhouette of the St. Petersburg was clearing the shriveling bulk of Dolores B, heading for deep space on automatic pilot. On the forward screens, the Terran ship didn't look like it was going to alter away. The captain opened the line to fire control. "As soon as they're within range, Cy." "Thank you, Captain. 3 million in closing." This, she knew, gave them less than 20 seconds before coming into effective laser range. Just time enough to wonder whether they were being altruistic or used. Time to hope the babies would be safe. On her weapons repeater, the Terran ship dropped neatly into the crosshairs, and Cy said, "Fire!" Utopia plane had entered the Dolores B system some hours before, warily skipping in and out of dimension, never in 3D space long enough to present a target as she spiraled inwards. It was a dead-end star system of 3 lifeless pieces of rock and a frozen gas giant, all without colonization or mining potential. Which in no way explained what the Terran survey ship, St. Petersburg, was doing in the Dolores system, so far off her plotted course. Nor did it explain its garbled distress signal several hours before, or why Scanner Room could detect no signs of life aboard the Earthship as she orbited the 3rd planet. Utopia plane stopped a cautious 900,000 kilometers off, lasers fully charged, torpedo tubes open and ready. Captain Brown leaned forward and studied the undamaged hull lines of St. Petersburg on his screen. Although he didn't consider himself a superstitious man, he couldn't help feeling relieved that as captain, he would not be leading the boarding party. Lieutenant de Gersh would be doing that. "Cy, how would you like to go EVA?" "I wouldn't," came the immediate reply from the young woman watching her own screens. "Will I need my spacesuit?" Brown chuckled. "No, there's full atmospheric integrity aboard St. Petersburg. Ready portside shuttle. Frank will relieve you at fire control." As Cy left the control room, Captain Brown consulted the traffic plot for their region of space. The Xenoid War was still active in several star systems in the area, and a Terran warship, Valentina Tereshkova, was within a 2-day subspace jump of Dolores B as it returned to Earth from mopping up operations in the nearby Herschel Alpha system. Odd, he thought. Herschel Alpha to Earth had been St. Petersburg's course too. He opened the line to communications again and dictated an assistance signal to Valentina Tereshkova. It would be 4 days before either a reply or the ship itself arrived. Too bad it had to be a Terran ship, Brown mused. Earthers in general were all right, he supposed, but he didn't like their imperious attitudes, especially when dealing with their colonies or former colonies. Still, Terran or otherwise, the less time he was alone, he decided, the safer he'd feel. The shuttle had docked and an entry port been forced open before life readings began to register inside St. Petersburg. "Why now?" Cy said, watching the faintly twitching meter needle. "I'm not sure," said Dr. Norsk. As Cy was the youngest of Utopia Plane's crew at 18, Ben Norsk was the oldest at 104, but just as unenthusiastic about being where he is. "If just one person's alive in there, we should have picked up life signs by now." He paused as behind them the boarding party guided the first of the mobile probes through the airlock. "It's probably because the life signs are so faint, and yet they're steady, healthy. It may be that whoever's in there is physically small, and more than that, there's 2 of them." "Human?" "One of them is, yes." He gave the instruments another long look. "The other, probably not." 2 probes were inside St. Petersburg now. One moved on its anti-gravs forward through the control areas, seeing emptiness, hearing silence. The second, gliding aft through the accommodation spaces, was experiencing the same, only here the emptiness and silence was much more human. It filled cabins and lay in bed, sat in chairs, and covered personal items. Ghost ship. The phrase drifted unwelcome through Cy's mind like a sheeted form. She hated this close-in work, this mystery and creeping about. Her forte, the specific she'd been genetically engineered for, was to be the integral human in long-range weaponry, when ships were targets and targets were fast numbers in her head. The laser at her hip felt unnatural. "Audio!" said Technician Jensen at the sensors. "Source?" "Recreation area, lower deck, aft, ma'am." Sounded like a squawky sort of voice. She rechecked her monitors, blinked, and said, "Computer filtering has it that the words were, 'Who's a clever boy, then?'" "Did you copy that, Captain?" said Cy. "No mystery there, Cy," said her captain, watching and listening several thousand kilometers away. "A squawky voice saying something like that? Probably a parrot or the like, a pet or lab bird. Not unusual with non-combative vessels." "Does this mean we're looking at something that makes people disappear but not birds? Would this be your non-human life sign, Dr. Norsk?" Before the doctor could reply, Tech Jensen barked again. "Audio! Forward section!" Sounded like... She looked up from her monitors. "There's a baby in there!" Cy found the baby boy lying naked on the deck in the forward biolab, kicking and crying. The boarding party searched, but a parrot and a newborn remained the sole living things aboard St. Petersburg. "Didn't the captain call this a non-combative vessel?" said Dr. Norsk. He was staring down at the 4 flat silver nukes in St. Petersburg's cargo bay. Sai stepped up beside him with the baby in her arms. "Primed and ready, too," she said with professional detachment. "Mark IVs, designed for use against surface targets." "Dolores 3? "The sooner this ship's log is checked, the sooner we'll get some answers." "Yes," he began, then stopped and regarded Sai with an odd expression, almost a knowing smile, and said, "Where did you learn to do that?" "Recognition of various classes of weaponry? It's basic training." "No, I meant that." And he nodded to the baby. Sai looked down at the child cradled in her arms. His eyes were drooping shut and he was no longer crying, and she suddenly realized she'd been gently rocking him the past minute or so. "I never told you how to pick him up," said the doctor, "or how to hold him correctly. And yet you did it, and now you're rocking him to sleep. Ah, Miss DeGurch, I think your maternal instincts are showing." "What's that?" she said, blinking. I'm doing what?" "Let me take him back to the ship," said the doctor, and as he made to take the baby from her, Sai surprised herself by pulling away. Then, realizing the situation, she allowed him to take the child from her. "Be careful," she said. Best get him fed straight away." The doctor, the baby, and the parrot shuttled back to Utopia Plane, leaving Lieutenant DeGurch in charge of St. Petersburg with a skeleton crew of 5. Utopia Plane slid into a tight orbit around Dolores 3 and began scanning the surface. A few small structures were found dotted amid the rocky terrain, along with a dish antenna array set in a 50-kilometer diameter circle. Repeated calls on the general frequency, however, remained unanswered. Trying to find answers to other questions, Captain Brown paid a visit to the med lab. "Well, Ralph," said Dr. Norsk, "young DeGurch has transmitted St. Petersburg personal logs, and I've been running a check on the crew's DNA. At first, the way the patterns matched up, it looked like the baby was the offspring of the ship's biotechnician, Dr. Pitney Lees. But double-checking showed conclusively that he's not the child of Dr. Lees at all. He is Dr. Lees." The captain leaned through the door to the infirmary to glance at the baby lying in a makeshift crib. "Ben, I know this ship's exec is all of 18, but I refuse to believe the Earthers are making biotechs out of newborns." Dr. Norsk joined him in the doorway. "Pitney Lees is almost my own age. I did my medical training with him on Earth more than 70 years ago. But this has to be him, because no one has identical DNA patterns. No one, not even clones. It's like fingerprints and retina patterns, which I also checked." "Ben, be serious," said the captain. "No one reverts to a baby. For a start, where did the extra mass go?" "I don't know, Ralph. I don't know. But take it from me, that newborn in there is 92-year-old Dr. Lees. Because if it isn't, all we know about genetic science wasn't worth the trouble of finding it out in the first place." "And if it is Dr. Lees, what does that say? That he found the Fountain of Youth out here? Is that why St. Petersburg was in the system? That doesn't make sense." "Yes, it doesn't make sense. But the facts are incontrovertible. We need to know what happened aboard the St. Petersburg. How long before its computers are downloaded into ours?" "Downloading should..." A communicator toning for an outside call interrupted him. "Speak of the devil. Sai?" "Yes, sir. We've just finished transmitting computer contents. Also, while Technician Jensen and I were disarming those 4 nukes, we found a jury-rigged guidance system aiming them at that antenna array on the planet, which is strange enough. But what I can't figure out is that if they meant to attack that array, why go to the trouble of arming a survey ship? One of their cruisers would have done the job much more efficiently." "Maybe it's because one of their cruisers looks too much like one of their cruisers." "Point taken, Captain. So what's the array for? Most of it's made up of high-gain solar collectors, and by high-gain I mean gathering capacity equal to the energy output of an exploding sun. There's also 4 dishes of a different type spaced around the middle, but no amount of close scanning and computer analysis shows us what they're for. Captain, what if this isn't a Terran base? What if it's someone else's entirely? An enemy installation? This far behind the lines? Unlikely. Whosever it is, says Sai. Perhaps St. Petersburg stumbled onto it and the crew were eliminated. Except for Dr. Lees, who turned into a baby, added Dr. Norsk dryly. What's that? Sai asked. Ben has this idea. It's a fact, Ralph, not an idea. That the baby you found is actually St. Petersburg 92-year-old chief biotechnician. There was a long silence from St. Petersburg, and Brown had a mental image of his executive officers switching out a moment to laugh. Yet the image didn't fit. It was childish, and Saida Gertz wasn't a child and probably never had been. At least she said, without the least race of humor, Dr. Norsk, did you know that Dr. Lees is Earth's leading genetics expert? Is he, by God? That was always his specialty at med school, though what their best geneticist is doing out here... He trailed off, seeing another unanswered question looming. Come to think of it, Mr. Gertz, St. Petersburg's personnel file did seem to have a number of geneticists, anthropologists, and dimensional physicists in it. Yes, I thought so too, Doctor. How old do you think that parrot we found is? He glanced over at the bird sitting on an improvised perch in a corner of the lab, picking its seed and every now and again squawking, "Who's a clever boy, then?" I'm no vet, but he can't be too old as parrots go. 5, 6. Uh-huh. The parrot is also logged in St. Petersburg's personnel file, and its age is given as estimated approximately 100 solar years. Brown and Norsk glanced uneasily at each other, and as they both turned their attention to the parrot, Sai yelled from the radio, "Oh my God! The ship's sprouting babies!" Lieutenant Frank Peters sat in the captain's chair alone in the control room, not really relishing his temporary responsibilities as officer of the watch, and rather relieved the situation was quiet. Then a light winked on, and a voice said, "Deep range scanners." "Deep range report," said Frank. "Subspace disturbances at 700 million kilometers, bearing 006 by 202. He switched through to the deep range repeater. Something was skipping in and out of subspace at the very edge of the Dolores system. Valentina Tereshkova? Surely it was still 3 days or more away. Peter's hand hesitated over the battle station's alarm. Then another intercom voice said, "Analysis lab to the captain, repeating to officer of the watch." The voice suddenly broke and said, "We've just seen what happened to St. Petersburg crew. It's incredible." Frank slammed his hand down on the alarm. The babies were materializing on the deck, fetal shapes forming out of shifting jellies, arms and legs sprouting as Sai watched, fascinated and just a little afraid. There were 4 of them now in the control room of the St. Petersburg. She crouched down, reached out to touch one, then drew back. They were not yet fully formed, though at the rate they were developing, she guessed they'd been born within a few minutes. The general frequency was jamming as her team of 5 reported the same phenomena from other parts of the ship. "Stand by! Stand by!" she snapped with unaccustomed anger, and switched a line through to Utopia Plane. "Captain!" she began, but got no further, Brown cutting her off with his voice raised above the action alarm she could hear ringing in behind him. "We're tracking an unidentified intruder, dimensional skipping into the system. Prepare to break orbit and run for subspace, but wait on my say-so." "Aye, aye, sir." Sai reopened the general frequency. "Someone get down to engineering and power up the drive. The rest of you start gathering the babies as soon as they develop into birth-ish and take them forward to the accommodation area." She glanced down at the babies around her, sure now at least one of them was properly born. "There's 4 in here as well." Sai checked the deep-range scanner, but nothing showed yet. On the short-range plot, she saw Utopia Plane widening orbit and changing position. She wanted to be aboard, closed up in fire control. More than a wish or a desire. It was almost physical pain for her not to be there. The nukes, she thought. She'd disarmed them with Jensen earlier. Miss Jensen, belay the babies and rearm those bombs. Rearm? A touch of impatience in the word, babies crying in the background. Lieutenant, there are 40... Aye, ma'am. Cy looked around. The babies in the control room were all born now, but didn't seem to be getting any older. Their development, which had rushed them through into birth, had stopped. She sat down at maneuvering as power came into the drive and began plotting an escape orbit, Utopia plane toned in again. Our unidentified intruder has turned out to be Valentina Tereshkova. 3 days early, Captain? Yes. It must have falsified its stated course, been in reality only hours behind St. Petersburg. I don't like this, Cy. It smells. I don't know what of, but it smells. It's decelerating and still far off, but we're staying at battle stations for the time. Keep your drive ticking over and be ready to break and run. Break and run, Cy thought. St. Petersburg was no swift frigate like Utopia plane. It would need 2 hours at least to accelerate into subspace entry speed. Looking around herself again at the kicking, squalling babies, she felt as vulnerable and helpless as they. Aye, sir, she said. The line went dead, then suddenly snapped on again, and a male voice said, I wish to speak with whoever is now in charge of St. Petersburg. The unexpected, unknown voice shocked DeGurch out of her whirl of thought. This is Lieutenant DeGurch of the Martian frigate Utopia plane, she said guardedly. Identify yourself, please. She reopened the line to the captain. I am Dr. John Mond, head of the Terran establishment whose surface structures you recently scanned. Why out here? Dolores B is a nothing system. Just so, but it has a star, and a star is a source of almost unlimited energy, and that is what we require above all else. You sound very young for the rank you say you hold aboard that formidable vessel, Miss DeGurch. Are you a child of Milo Gartino's genetic engineering project? I'm a Gartino, yes, she said, trying not to sound offensive. Are you behind what's happening here, Dr. Mond? Who are all these children? I would have thought that was obvious, Miss DeGurch. It is, Cy thought. I doubt you've heard of timelines, Mond continued. How does the idea of biological time travel along the lifespan appeal to you? Mark well, I said biological, which is why these babies will not be returned to their adult states. Reversion destroys life experience. Their minds are now as they were when they were originally born. Tell me, Mr. Gertch, are you happy? She frowned in bewilderment. Am I happy? What the hell has that got to do with... Do you believe any of your breed are? I mean in a real sense. Do you take joy from everyday life outside of your duties? Tell me now, truthfully. Is that any concern of yours? Cy snapped, caught off guard. Listen, how about a few explanations here? Why was this ship about to nuke your project? For the same reason the approaching Terran vessel may attempt it as well. Because we are now a threat to them. I would have thought it was more a threat to you. She glanced at the deep-range scan. Valentina Tereshkova was just now visible as a hard, zigzagging pinpoint. Of course it is. All weapons of war are a threat. You are such a thing, Miss DeGurch, and I find you and your like the most threatening, the most frightening thing of all. Do you really think the Gartino experiment was a good idea? Making weapons out of people built to order. Would you like to see something even more extreme than this proliferate? What do you mean? I mean speeded up human evolution, tinkering not merely biologically but temporally. Our object was the reconstruction of the human being, manipulating not only genetics like your own electrobiochemical processes, but the evolutionary process itself. The discovery of timelines, be that of a bird, a human, or a star, was unexpected, and we see now a dangerous discovery. We have decided that humanity as it now stands is not yet ready for the knowledge, so we're leaving. There are things humanity was not meant to know, Captain Brown broke in, irony obvious in his heavy tone. Crudely put, whoever you are, although very close to the truth. Tell me, sir, What is the procedure during this recent war of yours when items of advanced technology have fallen upon a planet inhabited by unevolved beings lesser developed? There was a long silence from the captain. Sai didn't feel like answering either. Exactly, continued Dr. Mond. It's either retrieved or destroyed to prevent interference for the natural development of the people on that planet. And you're saying we're not sufficiently developed. Let's use the proper word here, Doctor. We're too immature for what you've discovered, Captain Brown continued. Yes, immature. Do I sound superior? If so, it's because I've seen the future of the human animal. It's because I've been there. And even in its untampered form, I don't like what it is to be. We're leaving now. It's within your power to stop us. Your frigate has swifter capabilities than those clumsily tacked onto the St. Petersburg. But there'll be nothing gained, and all of us will lose. The process of our departure has begun. I suggest you evacuate this star system and persuade that other warship to do the same. The line crackled and closed, leaving open the line to Utopia Plain, where Lieutenant Peters could be heard counting off decreasing ranges in the background. Around Sai, the babies were kicking and crying. Captain, she said. Yes, Sai, he said quietly. Set the ship on an automatic course to exit the system, then gather your people and the babies. You can transship directly. Prepare for docking. The general frequency opened. Tech Jensen said, All 4 nuclear weapons rearmed and ready, ma'am. I'm sorry, Jensen, said Sai, but we don't want the Earthers hurting themselves when they salvage this ship later. Disarm the bombs. The line hissed with a long, drawn-out breath. Disarm! Aye, aye, ma'am. Long before Utopia Plain had undocked from St. Petersburg, 45 babies making a nursery of Norsk's medical lab, the disarray on the planet had begun to angle towards Dolores B. Almost immediately after, there followed increased disturbances deep within the core of the star. Slowly, gradually, Dolores B began to shrink, to collapse in upon itself, changing color as it drew steadily hotter, passing from yellow to violet to a burning, glaring white. Utopia Plain broke orbit and accelerated it out, gravity rings rippling down her hull. 4 million kilometers away and closing came the Terran cruiser Valentia Tereshikova. Lieutenant Peters flipped back the plastic cover on the IFF override and jammed his finger down on the sensory panel. It lit with the words genetic code confirmed, and he reported to the captain. On rear-view screens, the racing silhouette of St. Petersburg was clearing the shriveling bulk of Dolores B, headed for deep space on automatic pilot. On the forward screens, the Terran ship didn't look like it was going to alter away. Brown opened the line to fire control. As soon as they're within range, Sai. Thank you, Captain. 3 million and closing. This, she knew, gave the cruiser less than 20 seconds before coming into effective laser range. Just enough time to wonder whether they were being altruistic or used. Time to hope the babies would be safe. Fire! The forward lasers howled out half-power beams, smacking the Earth ship dead on the nose. Disoriented, their forward sensors temporarily blinded, Valentina Tereshikova changed course away. Utopia Plain belted past, powering for deep space. 30 seconds later, Dolores B supernovaed, a deep and sudden glory of hard white light pushing out of the star and growing in a silent, slow explosion 30 million, 50 million, 100 million clicks across. Engulfed, the inner 2 planets flared and vaporized, followed by the gas giant flashing into a miniature momentary sun, glowing, gone. Later scanner replays showed the 3rd planet vanishing before the blast reached it. There was uncertainty whether it had vaporized like the others, yet no one could say where the planet had gone or how. However, there were those who would later ponder timelines and make educated guesses. Some hours later, and 10 billion kilometers out from the exploding star, Utopia Plain neared subspace insertion. For the past 30 minutes, they'd been eavesdropping on Valentina Tereshikova, somewhere on the far side of the ever-growing supernova, as it transmitted coded messages back to Earth while trying to catch the St. Petersburg. The code hadn't been broken, but Captain Brown had a fair idea what he was being called. Down at Fire Control, Seidegerch was coming to terms with the intricacies of a baby bottle, helped by Dr. Norsk and encouraged by members of the crew. The parrot perched on the shoulder of Frank Peters, giving him a faintly piratical air. Cy had asked for a chance to feed baby Pitney. "My baby," she said, laughing. Brown thought she looked happy enough, her genetic origins notwithstanding. And although it was true she was a manufactured weapon, she was also a human being. Perhaps Dr. Mond had been too pessimistic. Maybe his researches to find the ultimate had taken him so deep into human darkness he could no longer see the light. Perhaps. The captain was the only one in the control room to notice the screens go blank as Utopia plane slipped into subspace, heading home to Mars. The others were watching a girl of 18 patting a baby gently on the back. The baby burped. Cy smiled triumphantly around the control room and let Pitney's tiny fingers grab hold of the bottle. "Who's a clever boy, then?" said the parrot. I never realized before this story how little of YA fiction contains the search for youth. It's not absent, of course. Fairy tales are rife with it. And our own programming has shown that there's a significant overlap between YA and fairy tales, mostly from the evil step-parent contingent. But this trope isn't especially common. I wonder if that's because, on average, the age of protagonists in YA stories are younger. Why worry about youth when you're more impatient or worried about growing up instead? Is it a requirement that a protagonist has to accept their status as an adult before they gain any concern about growing old? In this story, the reversal of age was never the real goal of the scientists, more of a discovered side effect. But that side effect, youth, was so powerful, so primal, so desirable, that it outstripped the Terran scientists' original goal. Were the entire crew of the St. Petersburg experimental subjects? I don't think so. Or when given the opportunity, did they all choose to roll back their biological clocks? But consider also the alternative. We call someone who's irresponsible or incapable of making their own decisions immature, regardless of their biological or physiological age, implying that too much youth is also undesirable. I'm sure you can think of countless examples, vocabulary aside. The young protagonist yearns to grow up. The villainified, mature protagonist abandons all other goals to roll back the clock. What then, to use a sci-fi term, is the Goldilocks zone of age? How does a person, a culture, or a civilization define it? And where can I read some fiction about that search? If you have some candidates, send them to us on Twitter or post them for us on our Facebook page. Join us next week as we welcome back Holly Schofield with Take Another Look. If you're one of our authors, narrators, or fans attending Worldcon in Spokane, Washington this year, come let us know. I'll be in attendance and would love to meet as many of you as possible. And make sure you check out the Podcasts for Young Adults panels Saturday at 10 a.m. I'll see you there. Cast of Wonders relies on your donations to pay our authors and to bring you the best in young adult audio fiction week after week. If you've enjoyed this story, please consider making a donation using the PayPal link available on our website. Every one-time and monthly donation helps, and you have our heartfelt thanks. Cast of Wonders is a production of Wolfsbane Publishing and is brought to you by the creative team of Barry J. Northern, our publisher and artist, assistant editor and slush wrangler Jeff Height. Our audio production team is Alan Sale, Jeremy Carter, and Ricky Lacoste, and I remain, as always, your humble editor and host, Marguerite Kenner. Our episodes are released under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 4.0 international license. Share it all you like, but don't change it or sell it. Our theme, Appeal to Heavens, is by Alexei Nov from musicalley.com. Thanks for listening.